Joining us now is GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. Good to see you, Mark. And should we start with Paris yesterday? Because Sir Keir Starmer would have been hoping to demonstrate a united front with Europe. It was anything but, really, with Olaf Scholz walking out early.
Listen, there's no way to sugarcoat this. This is deeply embarrassing for Sir Keir Starmer, who just a day earlier, of course, wrote and had various newspapers talking about his bold peace plan to put UK forces effectively into a very troubled, very dangerous area as part of any peace plan that would hopefully eventually be hatched out between the US, Russia and Ukraine. But he got short shrift, really, at that summit, with Germany and Poland saying absolutely not. This is premature and inappropriate to be talking about this. And you can understand why, because no one knows what the shape of any potential peace deal will be. But regardless of that, actually to commit troops to such a volatile area, this isn't like, the DMZ in Korea, which is, bad enough in terms of the border, the requirements of 25 permanent US personnel along that stretch between South Korea and North Korea. This is a hot zone where we've had 3 years, and we continue to have the most bloody trench warfare, hand-to-hand fighting points where it will be very, very difficult to ensure that the sides are kept apart and abide by whatever the peace deal is that hatches out. So that kind of commitment is going to be very dangerous for any country that decides to put their troops in harm's way. And it's clear that Germany and others just felt that Sir Keir Starmer was being completely premature in going out there and making this.
Tensions erupted at an emergency summit in Paris as German Chancellor Olaf Scholz publicly condemned British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's proposal to deploy European peacekeeping troops in Ukraine. The German leader dismissed the suggestion as completely premature and highly inappropriate, expressing visible irritation at Starmer's approach. Scholz's sharp rebuke underscored growing divisions among European allies over how to handle the ongoing war in Ukraine, while the UK, France and Sweden signalled openness to considering a European force to monitor a ceasefire. Germany, Spain and Poland rejected the notion outright. The discord led Scholz to leave the summit early, further highlighting the fractures within the European bloc. Starmer's proposal came amid concerns over shifting foreign policy priorities. The British Prime Minister warned that European nations must be prepared to take responsibility for their security as Washington reevaluates its global commitments. Ukraine's fate is an existential question for Europe, Starmer emphasized, urging allies to bolster their military spending and readiness. However, Scholz pushed back forcefully, arguing that any discussion of European troop deployments were premature and risked undermining diplomatic efforts. "It is the wrong time to have this discussion," he said bluntly. "These debates are taking place over the heads of the Ukrainians, about peace talks that haven't even begun." Adding another layer of complexity, high-level US officials arrived in Saudi Arabia for private discussions with Russian diplomats aimed at negotiating an end to the conflict. Notably absent from these talks was Ukraine itself, sparking concerns that Kyiv could be sidelined in potential peace negotiations. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky responded with defiance, stating that Ukraine would not recognize any agreements made without its direct participation. The U.S. delegation, led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Putin's Foreign Affairs Advisor Yuri Ushakov. Russian officials described the discussions as purely bilateral, reinforcing fears that the West may be moving toward a settlement that does not fully align with Ukraine's interests. Back in London, the debate over Starmer's peacekeeping proposal intensified, with critics questioning whether the UK would act unilaterally in Ukraine. Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander assured that Parliament would be consulted before any British troops were deployed, stating, "It is my understanding that, if circumstances allow, Parliament would have a vote before any troop deployment." However, she acknowledged that discussions were in the very early stages. Pressed on whether Britain would send troops without European consensus, Alexander reiterated the importance of coordination with both European and US allies. The Prime Minister has been clear that any security guarantee must be worked through with our European partners and with America, she said. As the war in Ukraine grinds on with no clear resolution in sight, Europe's deepening divisions over a potential peacekeeping mission expose the difficulty of forging a united strategy. While some leaders advocate for proactive military commitments, others, like Scholz, warn against hasty decisions that could upend fragile diplomatic efforts. With Washington engaging Moscow behind closed doors and European leaders struggling to find consensus, Ukraine's future remains uncertain. The question now is whether Kyiv will be allowed to shape its own fate, or whether global powers will decide its destiny for it.
Well, I may not necessarily be the best advocate for monogamous heterosexuality or stable marriage, having been divorced twice. But do I think family matters? Jordan, on the 3rd of June last year, as I was coming into London by car to go back into politics, having left it a few years before, my ambition was to get the United Kingdom to be a self-governing, independent nation. And for many, many years, I was pretty much on my own fighting that battle. The day we left the European Union, I thought, right, I've done my job. And that day on the 3rd of June, when I was coming back, thinking, well, this really rather comfortable, lovely life I've got is about to disappear, I thought, why am I doing it? And I came up with 3 words: family, community, and country. They're the things that matter to me above absolutely everything. And I have tried, in difficult circumstances, I've tried to make sure with both ex-wives that our children have had as stable an upbringing, given the circumstances, as they can possibly have. I think part of this, and this is important, about who we are as a country and who the West is, we've kind of forgotten that what underpins everything is our Judeo-Christian culture, and that's where we need to start.
Nigel Farage, one of Britain's most controversial yet influential political figures, has opened up about his decades-long campaign to secure the UK's departure from the European Union. In a candid reflection, he highlights the personal sacrifices he made, the values that shaped his mission, and his vision for the country's future. For years, Farage was at the forefront of the movement advocating for Britain's sovereignty, a fight that saw him clash with political elites, the media, and even members of his own party. His tireless campaign culminated in the historic 2016 referendum, a moment he describes as a hard-won victory against the entrenched establishment. "This was never about me," Farage insists. "It was about standing up for the ordinary people who felt ignored, sidelined, and dictated to by bureaucrats in Brussels." Yet, the political battle took its toll. Farage has spoken about the personal cost of his activism, including the strain on his family life and the constant barrage of criticism. "It's easy for people to forget the sacrifices made, not just by me, but by so many who believed in this cause," he says. Farage believes that beyond political and economic arguments, the Brexit movement was driven by a deeper desire to protect and restore traditional British values. He frequently references the importance of family, community, and Judeo-Christian principles as cornerstones of British identity. "We are a nation built on shared traditions and a moral framework that has guided us for centuries," he asserts. Farage's influence on British politics remains strong, even after Brexit, and he continues to shape the debate on national sovereignty, immigration, and economic policy. As he looks ahead, he sees the fight as far from over. Brexit was as much about reclaiming that cultural identity as it was about leaving the Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Join our Telegram community for more updates.